So, this is just a pose demo that I've done a while back on clavicles. And I just opened this up specifically to show what a bad breakdown looks like. So, first of all, what is a breakdown? Well, a breakdown is a key that we put in that goes between two of our key poses. Now, this is automatically where things get a little bit confusing. So, we have keys. Keys are in Maya, and when you're in Blender or anything like that, keys are the frames that we save. So if I go in Maya, oops, that's not Maya. This is Maya. If we go in Maya here, if I go on frame 40 and take a control and hit S, that sets a key. It saves that pose on that frame. Great. Now, when we're speaking about animation, keys are the frames we save, but they are also in animation terms, not Maya terms, but animation terms, they are the key poses. These are the, you can almost say, golden poses. They are the main building blocks of our shot. Breakdowns, which in Maya terms are also a key, it's a pose we save. But breakdowns in animation terms are the poses in between our key moments that describe how the character moves. They describe the motion. So, for example, we'll just use a simple sphere. Let's say we have our start right there and our end over here. These would be two keys, start and end. We might also have another storytelling key in the middle. Maybe let's say that we're doing some sort of bounce right there. That circle's looking more square somehow. There we go. So these might be our three keys in our animation, describing the story. It starts, screen left, at some point it's in the middle, up in the air, and it comes down. Those are keys. They're key poses. I should make that very clear. So key poses. Well, actually, rewrite here. Key poses versus keys. Now, breakdowns. Breakdowns are going to be, like I said, the poses that describe the action. And these are extremely important. So when we put breakdowns into our animation, the goal is to help show how the object goes from point A to point B to point C. So for example, if I was to just take this and go straight into splines in Maya, so just let Maya start in-betweening it for me, which is another term we'll go into in just a little bit. It would basically just go like this. Straight line, and our spacing would be very even. It would be boring, bland, the ball would just slide up, slide down. The reason being, we don't have breakdowns. We are not describing the motion. So, when we go into our animation, we want to add extra keys between our key poses to describe that. So, for example, I don't want this straight line, I want an arc. So I might put a pose right up here. So you see how it's favoring that top. Suddenly that one breakdown is going to arc the motion and favor the top. Now, if we're doing a bouncing ball, I would add a breakdown here as well. And that would favor that motion coming down. But I could change it. Maybe I'm going to add my breakdown over here. So now, instead of a bouncing ball, we're going to get whoop, that, a little swoop. So now it's almost a roller coaster. The ball goes up, 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 and then whoops through and down, and then we can maybe go for a loop and do a whole crazy thing. But we are putting that pose in to describe the action. And the more breakdowns you put in, the more you will help to describe that action and push your spacing, your timing, all of that. So that is the importance of breakdowns. It is describing the action and allowing us to tell a story through motion. If we don't have it, all we have are key poses, which you could almost think of key poses almost like, let's use another term for this. These would be comic panels. So if you've ever read a comic book and you're looking through them, most of the time they don't really show how a character gets from point A to point B or exactly the motion that they take. They're just showing these key moments in the story. And as we flip through, we get the story, we get the idea behind the whole thing. Those are your key poses. That's what a comic book is. It's a collection of key poses, which is really cool. Now, some comics go even more. So if ever you've seen like the One Punch Man comics, at some points in that comic, it's just like basically watching an animation just in storyboard form. It is fantastic. It's basically an animatic. But most comics, they are key poses. The breakdowns are what take our animation and go from like comic book, just story beats, to animation. Now, the next term that we need to think about is in-betweens. Now, this is going to be in-betweens from a kind of CG animator perspective, not so much a 2D animator. They're very similar, honestly, but we approach them differently. Specifically because in 2D, in-betweens were either done by the animator if they had enough time, or done by a second person. This is why you had a position called in-betweeners. In-betweeners would take the key poses and the key breakdowns, the main breakdowns that the animator would do, and then they would animate between them to fill in the animation. Basically, they did this so that the really good animators, Glenn Keane, Milt Kahl, all of these like just amazing animators, could do more shots, could start to animate more shots, and they spent less time doing the tiny little in-betweens that just kind of fill in the gaps. Not that that's like a boring, meticulous, or like just mindless job. No, to be an in-betweener, you have to really know what spacing is and really understand the concept that the animator wanted in the first place. But it just let the more talented, or I should, the more experienced animators, that's a better way to put it, the more experienced animators get to more shots. In CG, we don't really have that position because Maya is our in-betweener, Blender is our in-betweener. It will fill in the gaps for us. So, yay. The big thing though is the in-betweens, once again, are going to be dictated by our breakdowns. So to get good in-betweens and to get the computer to really help us, we need breakdowns, or else we're just going to get those boring, linear, basic lines that are meh, just not interesting. So all of this is extremely important for us, the concept between key poses, breakdowns, and in-betweens. And out of all of them, key poses, extremely important because that's what tells our story. If our key poses don't work, we don't have a story. And this goes right down to posing, but also into the timing, the spacing of the poses. So how far does the character get? All of that. But we want to make sure our story reads well. Once we do that, we have to go to our breakdowns and we have to describe our motion. That's the big thing. You have to think about how you want your character to move. It is not just a matter of taking your key poses and putting more keys in. That is not the point. And that's the biggest thing that I tend to see students fall into when they first get started, is that thought of, I've got my keys, my key poses, hit spline, yay! And now it's just a matter of adjusting my spacing and my timing. But how? You do that by thinking through your breakdowns, not just adding random keys, but thinking through them. I know I keep repeating that, but it's a very important concept to to really grasp onto and take to heart. So let's take a little bit more of a complex example here. Let's see, is there some kind of formula for spacing and timing? No, there is basically no formula. It's whatever feels good for the moment. Now, there are different things that we can do in terms of spacing and timing and all of that help. There's certain guidelines we can use. So for example, if you actually analyze people's walks, on average, everyone's different, but on average, if you take an average of everyone's default walk, it takes about 12 frames per step, or 1 second per 2 steps for people to walk. So you'll have a character having their foot on the ground here, and then by the time the next foot contacts the ground, and the other foot would be back here, so you have 1 step. That is typically 12 frames. So there's no rule to timing, but there are consistencies that we can use as a base. And this is just, it comes from analyzing reference and analyzing life. In terms of spacing, there's rules of sorts. So for example, you have ease in and ease out. That's basically as things start to move, they'll ease out, start slowly, speed up. As they come to a stop, they'll ease in, slow down. And Daryl, thank you so much for the sub. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Oh, and the little, is that an iguana? Is so cute. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's these things, ease in, ease out. There's fast in, fast out, which is the opposite, where something will move and it'll just explode out right here. So that's a fast out. Honestly though, those are just kind of ideas behind it. There's no rule of how things should be. It's whatever feels good and whatever needs to happen at that time. There's 101, well, basically, let's just put it this way. There's an infinite amount of ways that something can happen. So as an animator, we get to choose how we want it to happen. And this is, again, it comes down to the breakdown. We are choosing how to tell our story. And this is going to make a little bit more sense, hopefully, in the next part where we'll do a little animation test. Yeah, so a cat blinking is 2 frames to close, 5 frames to open. That's kind of the typical timing. Does that always happen? No, I can blink very slowly and then snap open my eyes. Or I could go snap, snap, and just do very quick blinks, just this rapid fire blinking. There are not consistence, there are generalizations we can make in timing, but it doesn't mean that it has to be that. And then when you start going into like cartoony animation versus realistic animation versus maybe a creature that is like 10 stories tall, those blinks are going to be much slower just to show the size. So, yeah. Now, let's go into an example that's a little bit more complex than just a bouncing ball. And this is going to show the next area that breakdowns really help with. And it's a concept that I talk about a lot on these streams because it is a very important one. Let's say we've got a couple of poses. So we've got this pose here, and then for some reason it has to transfer into this pose where he's pointing at someone. And you know what? Let's actually take our camera here, just for the sake of it. And I'm going to make sure it stays in place. Okay. So we've got the character going from here and then pointing. I don't know what's happening. These are just 2 totally random poses, but let's say this is our animation. And is the Minecraft head a mode for this rig? No, this is something I made for a demo. Just because this is actually something I do for my shots when I'm first animating. I'll just put a cube over their head so I don't have to look at the face. I just did this for a demo so that it's a little bit more interesting to look at than a basic cube. But I might actually make this available for students just so that they can put it on their rig if they want for their first blocking pass. So we've got these two poses. Now, when we have this in our animation, yay, that looks good. We're telling a story. Woo! Yay. These are key poses. These are the keys, the storytelling poses. Now, from here, if we were to just hit splines, what we end up getting is this. See how everything just slides forward? And in these basic straight lines, the hand is just going straight down. So right here, the hand is going straight down. The foot is just going in a straight line. If you actually just watch the foot, not the knee, it's going straight down. Yeah, it's very robotic. Everything is moving at the same time. Already we are running into that problem of splininess. This is when we talk about splininess or floatiness. This is a lot of where it comes down to. It's your breakdowns haven't described anything. So Maya or Blender, whichever program you're using, is filling in too many of the gaps, and we get this robotic animation. So what we need to do is we need to break down that motion. We need to go through and think, how should this move? How do I want to connect one pose to the next? And this is where you just have to start asking yourself questions. The biggest question that I always ask myself is, what leads, what follows? So for example, here, as he's coming down, I'm just going to set a key. As he's coming down here, everything is moving down at the same time. The hips are coming down, the knee is coming down, the foot's coming down, hands coming down, head's coming down. Everything's just coming down. So, what's leading? Well, nothing, really. Everything's just kind of moving together. So, what do I want to have lead? And this is where you look at your reference, really study that, or once you kind of have more experience, you start to, at this point you can create your own motion, which is really fun. But a lot of it just comes down to figuring out what leads. So for example, as he's coming down here, I could have the foot lead. So the foot slams down and that's what drags the whole body up. If I wanted to be a little stronger, I could have the hip lead, which is going to make him feel more like he stomps the ground, which could really go well into that next point right here, make him feel angrier. So we have a lot of choices that we can do here to start describing this action. We could start leading with the hand. So as he's got his hand up, it's his hand that leads in and he gets into this big S kind of pose before he points. That would make it very cartoony, a little bit more Hotel Transylvania-esque. We could do something like that. We have all the choices in the world. So let's just kind of push this a little bit. I want, let's say, the hips to lead. So I'm just going to push the hips down first. As the hips come down, I might take this foot and let's just slam that heel down into the ground. So we'll just, I'll copy this pose here. Boom. Now it's going to be a little off because these poses were not meant to be animated between. So grain of salt here. It's going to be a little rough. I'm going to actually get that foot in, to stay in position. There we go. And then I've got a little ball twist, heel twist. And there we go. Slam. Okay, so now we've got that heel falling down and the hip is, let's just exaggerate this, really coming down hard. And it might actually arc out to the right just a little bit. I want to describe that arc that's happening between these two poses. Let's actually go even lower. So we're actually overshooting this. You see how now the knee or the hips are going lower than where they were ending up here. Okay. let's get this other leg in place. I don't want it to start coming down at the same speed. So let's actually keep that knee up a little higher. That way we get a little bit of drag right in here. So it's still going to come down, but see how now that knee is favoring the top pose? Right there. We're getting a little bit of drag. Maybe as he's coming to stomp down, that foot's going to drag up as well. So now we feel like the heel is the thing that's leading in just the leg motion here. I could probably push it a little bit more even. So we get something like that. And you can see how all of a sudden that starts to create this nice little overlap in that leg. So we get that nice, and that's the hips and the feet. We haven't touched anything else yet. Okay. So how else can we drag this? Well, the body on this breakdown, let's stretch it out a little bit. Let that drag. So I'm watching the height of his shoulders here, and I want that to, it'll come down a little bit, sympathetic action, but I want that feeling that there's this moment of stretch, that the body is being pulled down by the hips, so that in the next frame, when we get the impact, you're really going to feel that whoomp, that weight in the body. We're going to get more contrast versus everything just going down and just being like a squeaky hinge, robotic and bland. So let's kind of push that. I could even maybe push that line in the body just a little bit more. The beautiful thing with breakdowns is because they move so quickly, oftentimes you don't really have to worry too much about keeping things perfectly anatomically correct. Of course, that depends on the realism you're going for in your shot. But yeah, you can go really crazy with them sometimes. I love this song. It's so cute and silly, and it makes me want to play Yoshi's Island for some reason. Now, as he's coming down, watch what I'm doing with the wrist. See how I'm trying to push it so that the arm is barely moving. In fact, I could do it so that the hand, like you can see, just barely moves here, and that creates that feeling of drag. So now, whoop, we're gonna get that nice big dragging motion in here, in that arm. You really feel it in that shoulder there. And then for the other arm, we're gonna let that one come down so that not everything feels like it's kind of glued in place, but we can still add a little bit more drag so that clavicle here can drag up a little bit. This arm is a terrible silhouette, so I'm gonna bring this up and just kind of add a little bit more rotation here. Keep that arm away from the knee so we get that negative space there. Something like that. So suddenly, in just that one breakdown, you feel that motion much more clearly. We're starting to really describe this motion, and you feel the weight of the hips dragging everything down versus everything just sliding forward. We'll add one more breakdown here. I don't want to fully animate this, but we'll kind of keep going here. So now let's start with the hips. I usually like to start with the hips because the hips are the leading motion most of the time. They're also the core of the character. That's where our motion tends to originate from. This is not always the case, but I still like to use the hip to kind of describe the arcs a little bit. So as he's coming through here, we now have this moment here. And right now, between these three keys, you can see how that hip just kind of slides. It's got a little bit of an arc, but not much. So let's push this a little bit more. Let's kind of have that arc across and then over. So something like that. Maybe we're gonna move it up a little bit more. So now we kind of get a little bit more of a bounce in there. off the ground. It's just going to make him feel a little bit more, a little bouncier. We could do that. Or if we want to sell the weight, we could push it down even more. So that way we get that kind of little pop at the end here, which I kind of like actually. Okay. So we're just getting a little bit of an extra pop in there. Now, as he's stomping his foot on the ground, this foot is just sliding down to the ground. Just slowly there, midway down. That doesn't really make it feel like a stomp, does it? So, I have a few choices I could do. I could let this foot now lead the action. So, it's hips, and then leg stomps, and then the arms come down. Honestly, I think that's what would be the better way of doing this, just because it's going to help describe that stomp and make that foot feel heavier. I could alternatively also keep this dragging upwards right here, and then have the stomp happen later, but that's going to also coincide with when he points. Or I could make the point happen first, but that then just gets weird. It's like you're looking at the hips, then the hand, then the foot. It's going to make the eye of the audience jump around a lot. So I think I'm going to just go with the foot stomping down. So, and as it hits the ground, let's actually overshoot a little bit so it hits, whoomp, and then bounces back up just a little bit. Now, as he bounces back up, see how his hips are moving up and down? And his heel is moving the same amount? That's not really good. If I'm breaking this down, I want to make sure that they don't move just a perfectly even amount here. So I'm probably going to keep that a little higher right there. So now we feel that bounce happening mostly in the hip, not in the heel. Now, this would also come down with more breakdowns. You could affect that. And again, what leads, what follows. Even if they're both bouncing, the hips could bounce up first compared to the heel. But we've only got 2 breakdowns here. So we'll do what we can with these here. So now we get that nice big slamming motion here. Okay, so hips, feet, they're pretty much done. At this point, we need to start describing the rest of the motion. How are we going to get the body from here to here? Well, we have a few different choices. Let's actually just start with the body. Since the hips are leading, I want the body to kind of drag behind that. And right now what's happening is he's just kind of going, straight into this pose. So he's reversed. You get this nice reverse C right here into this C pose here. That's the line of action. And he's just kind of sliding into the next pose. Well, how can we make that a little bit better? Well, let's try to whip that character forward a little bit more. So the hip might drop down here, kind of lead that action forward. But then the spine, let's zero out our translation here so that we get it back to its normal size there. The spine might still drag back. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the neck here and looking at the arc that that's creating. And right there, just because we kept that spine just a little bit further back, let's exaggerate this a little bit more. We're keeping that spine just a little bit further back right here. So still staying in that kind of reverse C. When we now get into that bottom, boom, you really feel that chest overlap and get that hit in there. And all we would need then at the end is a little settle, and you get that little bounce in there. And just that one little tweak avoids that just robotic, slow tilt of the body. I should have play blasted those few frames earlier just for the heck of it. Now, the other arm, it's just kind of slowly moving down, kind of this type of motion I always kind of describe as a ticking clock. It's just kind of tick, 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 tick. It's just boring, not interesting. So let's bring that in a little bit more. I want to drag it up. Since the chest is leading, I want the arm to stay behind just a little bit more so that they're not feeling like they move together. And I can also start to add a little drag to that elbow. So we just feel that motion starting to come through. That hand is still kind of dragging from where it was, and now we get that bigger slam down. And you feel that chest leading right through there. The chest and the clavicle. And for this hand here, I'm just going to pose it so that it doesn't slowly open up. Let's see. And there we go. Now we get that. Now I'm getting a little bit of a pop backwards in that arc, which is not terrible, but I might just lead a little bit more. And maybe drag the elbow just a bit. So I'm watching my spacing and my arcs as I'm going through. It's bad that I just noted this Jules has a Minecraft type head. Maybe not. I wouldn't say it's a bad thing. You're just focused on the body mechanics first. Okay, so we've got that. Now watch this other hand here. See how it just kind of whips through at the same time as the hips. And this is something I always do when I'm looking through my poses. I'll just jump between pose to pose. Doot, 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 doot. Where does my eye take me? Where am I focusing? So when I'm looking at this, I'm noticing, you'll usually notice the biggest movement first. So here, it's the foot. That foot slamming down is the biggest movement that's drawing my eye. The hip is also drawing my eye, which is good. So it's foot, hip. And this hand is also drawing my eye. I'm looking at it, and it's like, if you kind of imagine a line between his hand and his knee, it's almost like they're connected. Even though they're moving a different amount, they feel connected in some weird way. I don't like that. This is when things are starting to feel just a little too samey. Again, robotic, spliney, all those terms. There's really no like proper term. They all kind of cover the same thing. So what I want to do is I just want to push this so that it leads a little bit differently. So his elbow is starting to come out. I want that elbow to keep leading here. Right through. So maybe I'll swing that out just a little bit more. So we get a slam in there. And the upper arm, or sorry, I should say lower arm. Let's just drag that back and arc it down a little bit more. And even here, let's kind of arc it through and then around. So now as the leg comes down, the arm is getting this extra swing in there. So we get that kind of, that hand coming out, and it's going to make it more dramatic, more angry versus just, yep, and the arm comes down. Now it's, and he has that slam outwards with that fist right there. Okay. Now, I actually didn't animate the head here. I could do that where I drag the head up. Maybe I'll translate it up as well just a little bit to get an extra little bit of drag. And then here, the head's not going to drag nearly as much, honestly. Mostly because if it did, it's going to lose the fact that he is trying to focus on something. Probably bring it down just a little bit more. And let's drag it up here just a little bit more. Whoop. Whoop. There we go. Very basic. Honestly, we could push this a lot more. Like, as I'm looking at this now, I feel like this arm could be dragged up just a bit more here. So we get that swing through. What else? The clavicle here on this pose could be pushed down and forward just to add more weight to the clavicle. And then the arm as well could be rotated down. To be fair, I changed the camera angle on this, so it's going to be a little weird. There we go. So we get that. That's way more interesting. So just to compare, let's just delete those two keys. This is what we had before. See how everything just slides down? It's just slow and boring. By putting in those breakdowns, we now describe the action, what leads, what follows, and now it feels snappy. And I'm doing the breakdowns on one just because my poses were really close together. The actual distance doesn't matter. So for example, let's see, frame 7 is our last frame. Let's move this forward. Let's say that whole drop is going to take, let's say 8 frames, just for the sake of it. So I'm on frame 4 here. This last pose should be on frame 12. And then the frames in the middle here, this one's going to favor the ending. So let's put this on frame 9. Yeah, that works. And then this is going to be on frame 7. Or, yeah, 7. So now, that needs to be a little closer. Oop. So now we get this. It still feels spliny because we added more time, but our breakdowns are still working. Like so. So we're still describing that action. It's taking more time. Doesn't really make a difference. The only thing that more time does is it means that we either have to add more breakdowns, or once we have our key breakdowns, we need to go into our graph editor and really start cleaning things up to fix the in-betweens. That's really it. But the core principle of thinking through the action is the same. So now we've got that 12 frame span here. Let me actually set our time range here, 4 to 12. So it's this. Whoop. And that's probably a little too much time, like 8 frames for that type of motion. Probably could be done in 4 frames. If I was going for a cartoony shot, I would definitely make that a lot faster. But yeah, that's basically it. It's at this point, it's either more breakdowns or start cleaning up in the graph editor. Yeah, unless you wanted this to feel like he's in water, then that might work as well. But yeah. And this kind of methodology, this thinking of the breakdowns, trying to describe your action, thinking through how you want this to work, applies to any type of motion, regardless of what you're animating. Whether it's a very simple ball bounce, a pendulum, a tail, or a complex character, a facial pose, you are trying to describe that motion. Let's see, while doing breakdowns, you pay attention to the line of action. Yes. And, oh geez, Jer Annam, thank you so much for all the gifts. Oh man, thank you. And welcome everyone who just got a gift. Thank you so much for that's awesome. Thank you so much, Jer. Jeez, super generous as always. I'm gonna be doing this dance a little bit. Yay, thank you so much. And I just noticed we're losing our ducking here. Let's see. It should be there you go. Nope, that didn't do it. It went the wrong way. No, the music's all wrong. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Oh. That went the wrong way. I don't know what happened to the music there. Ding. Oh, I know what happened now. Let's see. Is this gonna do it? Let's try not to. Yeah, the epicness. The music starts kicking in. Okay, good. I fixed the music. When you accidentally activate the wrong compressor, it really gets things weird. But thank you so much, Jer. And the pre-animator, thank you so much for the sub as well. Let's okay, the question. I was answering a question. So do we pay attention to the line of action, or is this only during golden poses? You pay attention to everything. So when you're animating, there's the 12 principles of animation. You also have the principles of posing. So animation, it's line of action, in between, or sorry, line of action. You have your spacing, your ease in, ease out, overlap, overshoot, all of that stuff. Appeal. With posing, you have line of action, silhouette. You have tangents. You have all of this posing stuff. You are thinking of that on every single frame you animate, whether it's a key, a breakdown, an in-between, whatever. You are always thinking about all of those. Now, it doesn't mean that everything has to be anatomically correct. So for example, here on this frame, his spine is stretching more than it should. That would not be humanly possible to do that. But I can exaggerate it because it creates a little bit of a smear frame. Now at this speed here that I retimed it at, that's not going to work. But what I had before, that would be pretty good. You get this little bit of a smear. But I'm still thinking of the line of action. How is the silhouette looking? So for example, am I getting a tangent in between the arm and the leg? How's the hand looking in silhouette? What's the negative space between his arm and his leg, the negative space here? This is something I would tweak. See how you're getting that like butt form right there? If I was to try and really like finesse this, I would clean this up to get a cleaner line right through there. So something like this. See how now you're not getting that butt shelf? So something like that. So let's actually just reset that just to show the difference. That, you get that line, flat line. Ugh, not great. Or this, where you get a little bit of variation. Honestly, I would fix this with the Benbows to get that leg nice and clean. But we're getting that much more interesting shape. And then we get a little bit more pinch on this side, which is not a bad thing. So do you think about line of action, all of that stuff? And it actually makes the hip stronger too. Feels more like the hips dragging. Yes, you think about all of it. And once again, it doesn't mean that everything has to be perfectly anatomically correct, and no, but it has to be appealing. It has to look good. If you start not paying attention to your line of action, or like any of those elements, your shot's just not going to be interesting. Ideally, and this doesn't always happen, but ideally, when you're scrubbing through an animation, no matter what frame you land on, it should look appealing or interesting. That's just kind of a general rule of thumb. It's going to be hard to do, and you're not always going to be able to get away with that. But ideally, it should have some visual interest. And then there was another question here. Do you ever change, or do you call every change on your in-betweens as a breakdown? Like the foot contact the ground 2 frames before the breakdown? No, for me, the terminology I use, and everyone's a little different. Some people call breakdowns in-betweens. Other people, like they don't even use the term breakdown. They just go like your keys and your in-betweens, the poses between your main keys. Some people there's no real terminology in terms of animation. Every studio is even a little bit different. For me, my terminology that I use is my keys are the main story beats. I think of these like my comic book panels. These are telling the story and describing what's happening in the scene, but they don't have to describe every little action. So for example, if I have a character looking this way, all I need is really another key looking over that way, and I get the idea that, oh, they're looking in a different direction. The breakdowns are the other keys that I put in, the other poses that I put in to describe how they will go through from one pose to the next. So will they arc down? Will they arc up? Will it be a quick snap? I use this to help push my spacing, my timing, and my arcs, and just describing the motion more clearly. For me, in-betweens are any keys that I am not actually putting a key on per se. So it's kind of a vague notion because sometimes I will put a key on it, but it's mostly just controlling the spacing a little bit more. So for example, if we look at the graph editor, the in-betweens are everything in between the keys. That's what Maya is giving me. Maya is my in-betweener. It's filling in the blanks for me. So if I don't like what it's doing, I either adjust the in-betweens by going in here and adjusting the curves, or I add another breakdown to describe the motion. So for example, if I feel like right here, this is just, it's not reading super well, or maybe like this one right here, frame 9, that's definitely not reading that well, I might add another breakdown. Now, you can add a full body breakdown, which is taking everything, setting key on it, or at a certain point, you don't have to break down every single thing in your animation because some things need more keys than others. For example, when you're doing a walk cycle, your hips and your body really only need keys on the main key poses, the contact, down, passing, up, contact. The feet, though, will need keys, and by keys I mean the actual like Maya keys, set almost every frame. You'll have certain sections on ones just to help describe that foot arc and the way it pushes off the ground and contacts the ground. So that's totally fine. So for example here, this foot needs to be described a little bit more clearly. Let's have it slam down a little sooner, so it hits the ground a little bit faster. Maybe we'll push down a little bit more here. So now we get that. And then as it's coming down here, we need to let the toes drag back down so that if we know that he's going to land with his toes first. And let's actually drag that a little bit more. So we get this, maybe not so much there. Actually, let's even describe this a little bit more, a little differently. Let's have him bounce off his heel. So instead of slamming his foot down on his toes, which feels kind of strange, let's change how we describe this action. So his foot's coming down, and then we're going to flatten that foot just all the way. So boom, and then bounce up. And we could even maybe rotate the foot up a little bit like that. Now we get that roll of the foot. Boom. See how you feel that roll in there? There we go. Now, you do also want to make sure you're animating this from all views because his foot's slamming back quite a ways here. And I need to describe that arc just a little bit more, or else it's going to look a little weird. And then toe roll. Okay. And then from the front view, let's bring that back in here. So I am describing the action of the foot much more intensely here, and I would consider these as breakdowns on the foot. I'm trying to really push the way this foot moves. I'm not letting Maya in between it for me. But at this point, the terminology is a lot of gray. Some people would consider this just adjusting the in-betweens. Some people would consider this breaking things down. I tend to consider breaking it down because I am putting thought into it. I'm really thinking of how do I want to describe this. So hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully it, don't worry too much about the terminology, but more of the thought process between it all. That's the most important part, because even in in-betweens, we want to think about the in-betweens. When we get to the in-betweens, it is not a matter of, okay, I did my breakdowns, and then, hey, in-betweens, Maya's got it, you go. And then we just turn around and grab our coffee and yay, we're done. No, all the in-betweens we want to think about as well. Is really just, at least for me, in-betweens are making sure Maya is doing a good job, whereas breakdowns is making sure I am doing a good job and describing the action. And while blocking, do we need to key everything? Ideally, yes. You should be setting a key on all of your controls, set a key on everything, and move everything. One thing you really don't want to do, especially if you're in stepped blocking, is just move one control and nothing else. So for example, let's say you set a key here, and then you're going to do another key, and oh, I just need the arm to move. And just on that one frame, so for example, let's do it here. Let's actually do this on another pose. So we've got this pose here. Let's say on the next frame, he's going to raise his hand here. I wouldn't just do this. No. If you're just going to raise one control and nothing else, unless it's a very subtle motion, try to avoid that at all costs. You're going to get some weird animation. It's going to make things look horrible in the end. It's just not a good workflow unless you're doing a layered animation, and when you're doing layered, you'd have a whole other workflow to work with it. Instead, key everything and then try to move a little bit of everything. So for example, if he's raising his arm, try to do that yourself. You'll notice that when you raise your arm, your upper arm moves a little bit. So as he raises his arm, this is again where breakdowns come in, you're going to get a little bit of a raise in there. So that connects that lower arm to the upper arm. The hand might have just a little bit of drag and maybe a little rotation. As he's raising his arm, the clavicle might engage a little bit to help raise that arm. As that arm raises, if you watch, let's go full screen here. Watch the stripe here as I raise my arm. See how it twists? We're just getting that little bit of a motion in there. As I raise my arm, the weight shift of my arm has weight to it, is affecting my entire body, which means that I could put a little something in here. And it might be a little too much right now, but it's always easier to tone that motion back down than to not have it at all and try to put it in. So as that arm is raising, I might add just a little twist in there. And maybe let's kind of balance him out a little bit. So now we're starting to get into that. Is it too much? Yeah. Well, go into your graph editor, just tone it down a little bit. I always have the graph editor open just for this reason. It just makes it easy to get this nice subtle motion there. So now you can feel it going through. As he's twisting, this clavicle might drag back just a little bit. And I would go all the way down to the hips. So yes, set a key on everything and then think of how all of your motion affects each other. We are one connected being. If I move my hips, it'll affect everything. If I move my head, again, look at my shoulders. So I'm going to line myself up. Let's line the right of the shirt up here to the corner there. So I tilt my head. See what's happening to my body? See how it counters? And I'm kind of sliding off of the thing, but I'll tilt this way. Look at the body. It automatically tilted this way. If I go the other way, oops, let's get that lined up. It automatically went that way. The body is connected to the head because, well, you've got your spine. What's the spine connected to? Your hips. What's your chest connected to? Your arms. They're all connected. So if the body moves, well, the arms will move, the hips will move. The hips are connected to the legs. That means the legs and the knees will be adjusted a little bit. The feet typically are one of the few things that you can just kind of leave in place because gravity is pushing us down into the ground. Our feet are on the ground and it's keeping them still. Same thing if I had my hand pressed on something. As I'm moving, if I'm really pressing down on something, that weight is going to keep that hand and maybe the arm a little bit more stable. Everything else is still connected. And again, it doesn't mean that everything has to be moving all the time and you just have one head turn and all these big motions. No, we don't want that. But you want to think of how everything's connected. This is called sympathetic motion, and it creates that feeling of believability in a character versus a mechanical, just robot arm that's swinging around. And this is where breakdowns really come in handy. And then there was another question here. Well, actually, I think we're starting to go into a few new questions based on other topics. So let me finish up the breakdown talk and then we'll jump into the other questions. See, I can do the key poses, the breakdowns, but when it comes to creating the in-betweens between the poses, I tend to struggle and lose myself in the process. So there's two ways you can approach in-betweening. One is, just like I did with the foot earlier, just keep breaking it down. Honestly, you can keep breaking things down until you get to ones. You don't have to let Maya do the work for you. The other thing is just think of what you want to have happen. So, for example, let's take the hips. We've got the hips coming down here, and with the timing we have, they come down, and then you see how they just flatten out, and it's not that interesting. Well, what do I want to have happen? I want the hips to kind of lead the action. They'll start to come down, slam into the ground, and almost bounce back up into the point. So I want that weight in there. Okay. At this point, if I want, I can either add more breakdowns to describe that, or I can go into the graph editor and use the graph to describe that for me. And this is where you just need to know what to look for in the graph editor. There's two main things you're looking for in terms of the graph editor. Is the direction of the curve, whether it's going up or down. That basically tells you that there's a change of direction. So for example, the curve is going down here. It's going in one direction. Then it goes up over here. It's reversed. It's going in the opposite direction. Now, don't worry about which direction that is, because honestly, it depends on where your camera is. So for example, this is my up and down. As the curve comes down, the character comes down. As the curve goes up, the character goes up. But what if my camera was over here and he was Spider-Man on the ceiling? Suddenly, as my curve goes down, he's going up. And then as my curve goes up, he's going down. The direction doesn't matter, just that there is a reversal in there. And if you're ever curious and you'd need to know, like, is he going forward or back here? Just do a quick scrub and you'll figure it out right away. So, yay, done. The other thing to keep in mind is what's the direction or the angle of the curve. The flatter the curve, the less motion you have. The steeper the curve, the faster things go. So, looking at this curve here, we can see that it eases out. It's slow, fast, slow. It's pretty much just a hold here, and then slow, fast, slow. Okay. So with that, I want that kind of little bit of a hold, slam that hip down, and then bounce. Okay. Well, with that, I can maybe exaggerate the hold here, and I can do this either by adjusting my tangents or by inserting some keys, or I could just set keys in the viewport. It's all the same thing. So I'm going to push that hold a little bit more, so that way it can slam down a little sharper right here. Let's kind of push that even more. So really push that curve. You can see where the old one was here. And then one thing I always look out for is when I have a change of direction, are the two keys on either side even? So there and there? Yeah. That makes for a boring change of direction because it's just too even. So I'll maybe bring this down just a little bit more, and that'll make it a little bit more uneven, a little bit more interesting. And there's our change of direction. There we go. So now we have a little bit more of a hold, faster motion here than we had before. It's steeper. I could even go even more. Slam into the ground, bounce back up, and if I wanted an overshoot, we would just do something like that. So now, boom. Feel that weight in there? It doesn't just hit and plateau and then bounce back up. Now we've got that little bit of a hold at the top. Just don't pay attention to everything else, just the hips. And then, right in there. And if I want that bounce just to be a little sharper, let's kind of get in there. There we go. So that's pretty much it. It's when you're into the in-betweening phase, like you mentioned, that's when things start to kind of really fall apart if you're not careful. Even if you've put a lot of good breakdowns in, like I did here, we got those beautiful breakdowns. Yay, they work. And then the rest is like, it's okay. We still need to keep describing our action. We still need to go through and think things through. And that can mean adding more breakdowns. It can mean tweaking the curves, but we have to think through what we want. Don't just let Maya give you what it thinks you want. And I've talked about this a lot before, but my general rule of thumb when I'm adding breakdowns is I will try to add breakdowns based on the complexity or speed of the motion. So for slow motion, or let's do it this way. So for holds, if a character is just holding and they're not doing much, I tend to try and put a key every 8 to 12 frames. So a breakdown every 8 to 12 frames, a key or breakdown. This is going to be any time a character is just not moving, just staying there. For slow motions, I will try to have a key every 4 to 8 frames ish, sometimes 4 to 6, but like 4 to 8 frames. So slow motions is if characters go, hey, and it's like this, just there's really not that much speed to things, or they're very simple motions. It's just simple arcs every 4 to 8 frames. If I have, we'll just call this normal motion. So kind of think of a vanilla walk speed, like that kind of motion. I'll try to have a key every 3 to 4 frames. And then for fast or complex motion, so fast motion, like really cartoony stuff. Complex motion, think of like the hand motions in Naruto when they're doing their transformations and stuff. I'll try to have a breakdown every 1 to 2 frames. So basically keying every frame. Now, does that mean everything in the body always has to have that breakdown on the whole thing? No. So for example, if you're going to do the ninjutsu moment, your character's like this and then they're doing all of this complex hand motion and like puppetry. The rest of the body really isn't moving. So once I have my main storytelling beats in there, my main motions, when I start getting into that in-betweening, just like figuring out the smaller details, like the hands, at that point, I'll just key those. I'm already in splines, and I'm just focusing on getting those keyed out because the rest of the body is really just a hold. So, yeah, it's really trying to make sure I have enough keys for the specific type of motion that I'm getting. Otherwise, it's going to be kind of a pain to try and get that to work all the time. Like, yeah, the sloths in Zootopia. You don't need a lot of keys on those characters. They're just so slow. As long as you get your arcs right and your spacing right, you don't need a key every other frame because that's just going to be overkill. Really, can we go on ones? When I do blocking plus on ones, it gets jittery. If it's jittery when you're in blocking plus on ones, it usually means that your arcs are not working quite right. So you want to clean up your arcs. Even though if I'm blocking and I'm in stepped mode, I will still have the graph editor open and I will still be cleaning up my arcs, even if it's in step mode. So for example, here, let's say our animation, we weren't in splines yet, but we were still working in stepped. I would still go through, let's go with our hip here. And oh, did not change. There we go. Go with that hip and look at the arcs. Make sure that I'm not getting any wiggles. So for example, if this is happening here, up, down, why is that happening? Unless there's a specific reason, I would most likely want to ease that in right there. Or ease this down, like so. So you're still cleaning up your arcs, still paying attention to your spacing and all of that, even in step mode. Now, I tend to block in splines nowadays, just because it's a little faster. I always recommend people start learning by blocking in stepped mode. It makes you focus more on your poses, which are more important. This is just kind of doing two things at once. Once you get that, the knack of splining and the knack of blocking, you can combine them together. So hopefully that helps. But yeah, you can definitely block on ones, especially on complex actions. I would say for your first blocking pass, the first blocking pass is more of a storytelling, like get the main idea of the shot in. You shouldn't be doing your first blocking pass on ones just yet. That'll be more of like just before going into splines, making sure those complex actions are really thought out and keyed in. Let's see. My main struggle was really trying to in between everything when hands are moving, but the body stays still yet. Yeah, so in that case, just block it in step mode if you like step blocking. Until you get to that point where you now need to add details on the hands, but any more detail on the body is going to just kill it. It's just going to make keying the body a nightmare. At that point, go into splines and then just add keys on the hands. Technically, everything else is now moving, and now you're just adding those extra details on the hands and maybe the elbows, the arms to kind of connect them a little bit when they need to be. But the rest of the body at that point doesn't need keys on every frame because you've already described the main actions. So it kind of contradicts a little bit of what I was saying earlier, where you always want to set a key on everything, but that's a later phase thing. At the start, when you're first blocking things in, always key everything. Otherwise, you're going to get some weirdness. It's just going to be... So I think with that basically covers the breakdown stuff. Unless anyone else has questions on breakdowns, this is pretty much it. I know it's not a huge demo, but the big thing is think things through. Breakdowns are the part of the animation that describes what is actually going to happen. If you do not break things down, if you just set your main keys and then hit spline and then try to clean up from there, all you're going to get is a robotic, lazy mess. And by lazy, I mean Maya or Blender is lazy. It's just going from point A to point B with nothing else. So as animators, we need to describe our actions. We need to tell the audience, this is how it's moving. If we do not do that, you're not getting animation, you're just getting sliding. So really be clear with your breakdowns. Breakdowns are what's going to make or break your animation. Poses are the core. I know we've talked about so much about poses in the last month or so. Poses are the core. They are the building blocks that everything else is built on top of. Once you have good poses, breakdowns are what's going to make your animation between those poses into something worth watching. Otherwise, you're making a cool comic strip, just like a comic book or a storyboard, but the breakdowns make the animation. So really pay attention to that.